Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Learning Ruby using Codecademy. Okay, so right here we're going to start with the while loop. Sometimes you want to repeat an action in Ruby while a certain condition is true, but you don't know how many times you'll have to repeat that action. A good example would be prompting a user for a certain type of input. If they insist on giving you the wrong thing, you may have to re-ask them several times before you get the kind of input you're looking for. To accomplish this, we use something called a while loop. It checks to see if a certain condition is true, and while it is, the loop keeps running. As soon as the condition stops being true, the loop stops. So check out the code in the editor. Can you guess what it'll do? So we have counter is equal to 1, and while the counter is less than 11, we will put, it's kind of like print counter, but we'll put counter, and after that, counter will then be equal to counter plus 1, and then we have the end of the code. So it print all the numbers from 1 to 10. Okay, so danger infinite loops. The loop printed out the number from 1 to 10 and then it stopped. This was because the loop's condition said to continue while the counter was less than 11. Since the counter went up by 1 each time through the loop stopped when counter hit 11. What if we'd forgotten to increment counter? It would have stayed at 1. The loop would have kept checking to see if it was less than 11, and 1 is always less than 11, and the loop would have never ended. This is called an infinite loop, and it will cause your programs to crash. Avoid them at all costs. So here we have the while loop in the editor is currently an infinite loop. Correct it so it will end. Okay, so we have I is equal to 0. So while I is less than 5, puts I, and then I equal to I plus 1, and then it will end. Oops. Okay. So, alright. So I guess I had already done this part while I was trying to figure it out. So what we want to do is that we want the I to increase up to 5, not including 5. Because if we leave it at 0, 0 will always be less than 5, and it will become an infinite loops. So what we need to do is to make I equal to I plus 1, or the other way around also could work, where the I plus equal 1. So it printed 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. So here, the until loop. So the complement to the while loop is the until loop. It's sort of like a backwards while. So in the example we have I is equal to 0, and then until I equals to 6, I will increase by 1, and then it will end and puts I. So let's say it says in the example above, we first create a variable I, set it to 0, then we execute a block of code until I is equal to 6, and that block of code increments I. And when I is equal to 6, the block ends. And finally we print 6, the value of I, to the console. So on line 2, fill in the blanks that the loop breaks when the counter is greater than 10. And then on line 5, increment counter like we do in the example above. Okay, so we have counter is equal to 1, and then until the counter equals to 10, puts counter we have to put an increment, so we'll do counter plus equal 1. Whoops, 1. It looks like your code doesn't print a number 1 to 10 to the console. Oh, it didn't. Okay. So let's try. Let's see here. I would say 11. Okay. So until the counter, because when it hits 11, it stops. And then so it print 10. Okay. More assignment operators. We've been using syntax like counter equal counter plus 1, which works, but as you'll increasingly find with Ruby, there's always another way. And a shortcut is to use an assignment operator. You already know one assignment operator, which is the equal sign, which sets a variable. You can update a variable with additional assignment operators, however, which include plus equal, minus equal, time equal, and divide equal. For instance, when you type counter plus equal 1, you're telling Ruby to add 1 to the counter and then assign that new value back to counter. This provides a succinct way of updating variable values in our programs. Some languages have the increment operator plus plus and minus minus, which also add or subtract 1 from a value. But Ruby does not, so you'll have to make do with plus equal and minus equal. So let's see, the loop from the first exercise is in the editor. Rewrite it using the appropriate assignment operator. So right now we have counter equal counter plus 1, and we want to change that to plus equal 1. And it prints from 1 to 10. Okay. The for loop. Sometimes you do know how many times you'll be looping. However, and when that's the case, you'll want to use a for loop. Take a look at the example for loop in the editor. Can you guess what it does? So it says for num, which means number. So for num in 1, 3 dots, 10. So from 1 to 10, puts num. So for each number in the range of 1 to 10, puts that number, which is like to print the number. Okay, so it printed from 1 to 9. Okay, now inclusive and exclusive ranges. You saw a bit of the new syntax in the previous exercise. For num in 1, 3 dots, 10, what this says to Ruby is, for the variable num in the range 1 to 10, do the following. So the following was to print, quote, hashtag, curly brace, num, close the curly brace, quote. So as num took on the value of 1 to 9, one at a time, those values were printed to the console. The reason Ruby counted to 9 and not 10 was because we used the 3 dots in the range, and this tells Ruby to exclude the final number in the count. For num in 1, 3 dots, 10 means go up to but don't include 10. If we use 2 dots, this tells Ruby to include the highest number in the range. So now we'll update our for loop in the editor to make it print the numbers 1 to 15, including 15, which means we have to change 2 dots and add another dot to make it 3. Oh, wait. Oh, including, so it was right to begin with. Okay, so that was good. Alright, so 1 to 15, 15 included because it has 2 dots. Okay. Building your own. Okay, good work. You're ready to build your very own for loop. So write a for loop that puts number 1 to 20, including 20. Okay, so for num in 1 to 10 puts num. So we include 20. So we get rid of the 10. We get rid of 1 dot and we type 20. And it printed all the numbers from 1 to 20. The loop method. Okay, so far we've learned one way to repeat an action in Ruby is using loops. As is often the case in Ruby, however, there's more than one way to accomplish a given task. In this case, it's also possible to repeat an action using an iterator. An iterator is just a Ruby method that repeatedly invokes a block of code. The code block is just a bit that contains the instruction to be repeated, and those instructions can be just about anything you like. So the simplest iterator is the loop method. You can create a basic but infinite loop by simply typing something like this. Loop, open curly brace, print, quote, hello world, quote, and we close the curly brace. Now in Ruby, the curly braces are generally interchangeable with the keyword do to open the block and n to close it. So knowing this, we can write a smarter loop than the one above. We can say that I equals 0. So we want to loop do, which opens the block, I plus equal 1, which will add 1 to I, and then print between quotes, hashtag, curly brace I, curly brace, and close the quote. Break if I becomes greater than 5, and then end to close the block of code. So the break keyword is our get out of jail free card because it breaks a loop as soon as its condition is met. So we're going to replace the blanks in the editor with the appropriate keywords. Okay. So we have I is equal to 20, and then we want to loop do, which, so we're going to decrease 20 by 1, and we're going to print each of these numbers down by doing the quote, hashtag, curly brace, I, curly brace, quote. And then we want to break if I becomes less or equal to 0, and then we want to end the code. So it printed 19, 18, 17, all the way to 0. Okay, so now, next. So the next keyword can be used to skip over certain steps in the loop. For instance, if we don't want to print out the even numbers, we can write for I in a range of 1 to 5, 5 included. Next, if I modulo 2 is equal to 0, we print I, and then we end the loop. So in the above example, we loop through the range of 1 through 5, assigning each number to I in turn. If the remainder of I divided by 2 is 0, we go to the next iteration of the loop. Then we print the value of I. This line only prints out 1, 3, and 5 because of the previous line. So add a line to your loop before your print statement. Okay, so before the print statement, use the next keyword so that you skip the next iteration if the number I is odd. Okay, so next, if I modulo 2, in this case is not equal to 0, to print and then break if I is less or equal to 0 and end. So it print out 18, 16, 14 all the way to 0. Saving multiple values. Let's say we want to save a range of numbers in a variable. How would you do this? A variable can only hold a single value, right? But in Ruby, we can pack multiple values into a single variable using an array. An array is just a list of items between square brackets, like so. So you open a square bracket, 1, 2, 3, 4, close the bracket, the square bracket. The items don't have to be in order. You can just as easily have open square bracket, 10, 31, 19, 400, and we close the bracket. Alright, so create a variable called myArray. MyArray equals to, set it equal to the numbers 1 through 5, including in order. Okay, so we open the square bracket, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we close the square bracket and we run the code. Okay, so good. Great work. You're really getting the hang of this. Well, thank you. The loop iterator is the simplest but also one of the least powerful. A more useful iterator is the .each method, which can apply an expression to each element of an object one at a time. The syntax looks like this. So we would say object dot each, open the curly brace, pipe, item, pipe, and then we tell it to do something and we close the curly brace. But also we can use the do keyword instead of the curly braces. We can say object dot each do pipe item pipe. The variable name between the pipes can be anything you like. It's just a placeholder for each element of the objects you're using .each on. Okay, so we have array equal open square bracket 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we close the square bracket. Now we want to take the array dot each, do for each x in the array. We want x plus equal 10, so we'll add 10 to each x in our array, and then we want to print that x result. Okay, so then it should probably print 1 plus 10 will be 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And yes, that's the case. Okay. Cool, no? Now it's your turn to take the .h method for test drive. So in the example above, we create an array called numbers, and then we show two different ways to print each item in numbers to the console. So they used the numbers.h with curly braces, and then they used number.h with the do and end to close the code block. Okay, so now we have odds equals to 13579. So use the .h method on the odds array to print out double the value of each item. In other words, multiply each item by 2. So make sure to print rather than puts, so your output appears on one line. Okay, so let's see here. We'll do the do and the end. So for odds dot each do pipe item pipe, next line will print, right? Yes, print item and then end to close the code. Oh, I forgot to